I don't care if it's a federal requirement, Denise. We're cutting overhead, not babysitting rulebooks. That's the first thing out of Greg's mouth before I've even sat down. He's the kind of guy who thinks leaning back in a fake leather chair and tossing buzzwords like synergy makes him a leader. HR is there too, avoiding eye contact like she's watching a dog get put down. And I sit straight, clasp my hands, nod like a good little compliance ghost. That's what I've been for a decade anyway, right? 10 years of being senior compliance and risk oversight officer, and you'd think I invented the job title myself just to hear myself type. That's how they treated it, like I was some bureaucratic fun sponge killing their quarterly joy with documentation and legalese. Oh look, Denise is CCing legal again. Better hide your popcorn, here comes the email warden. Cute stuff, water cooler classics. But you know what's funnier? Every single damn warning I sent for the past 10 years? Timestamps. Archived. Filed under for when shit hits the fan. And before we go any further, listen, if you're one of the 90% who's lurking on these stories without hitting that subscribe button or slapping that little like, do me and my unpaid emotional support team a favor. Click M. It helps us sleep at night knowing someone out there appreciates federal-grade petness and revenge. You'll get more stories where silence does the stabbing. Win-win. Now back to Greg. He gives me a real zinger on the way out. Your title was inflated anyway. Like he's doing me a favor by telling me I was never really important. Like I'm some corporate stretch mark he's finally lasering off. And I nod still, like the quiet woman I've always been at this firm, because that's what they expected of me. Paper pusher, rule enforcer, no real bite. What Greg didn't know, what no one really paid attention to, was that my inflated title came with teeth. Real ones, federal ones. I wasn't just a compliance officer in name. I was the federally registered compliance designate under SEC Rule 206-4-7, which, to people like Greg, might as well be hieroglyphics. To the Securities and Exchange Commission, that title makes me the only person legally responsible for certifying the firm's internal compliance, and the only person legally protected as a whistleblower. For 10 years, I did the job right. I wrote the policies, filed the reports, raised the red flags, and for 10 years, they mocked me for it. Smirked when I asked for audit trails. Laughed when I used words like breach and liability. Greg once joked that my inbox could cure insomnia. Too bad it's now a loaded weapon aimed straight at his Armani-clad chest. Because here's the thing about documentation. It's boring until it's lethal. I walk out of that office without crying, without screaming. I don't even slam the door. I go back to my desk, plug in one last thumb drive, the encrypted one I keep in my purse next to my breath mints and pepper spray, and copy my entire email archive. 10 years, 300 plus flagged items. Each one time-stamped. Each one ignored. Each one now with a new destination. And as the elevator doors close behind me, I don't see my career ending. I see the beginning of the autopsy. The Monday after Q2 earnings dropped like a rock down a mine shaft, Greg strutted into the office like he'd just cured cancer with a whiteboard. Strategic streamlining, he called it, his version of a company-wide bloodletting. Even wore that stupid red power tie like it meant something. HR sent out a meeting blitz at 10 a.m. sharp, and by lunch, the office sounded like a morgue with Wi-Fi. People were either crying in the stairwell or frantically updating their LinkedIns in bathroom stalls. I wasn't on the first list, or the second. No, Greg saved me for dessert. Denise, he said, like he'd just remembered I worked there. Got a sec? I followed him to his office, one with a panoramic view of the parking lot and exactly 0 books on the shelf, unless you count the lean startup and a Funko Pop of Elon Musk. HR was already sitting in the corner like a wax figure of corporate regret. Greg didn't even wait for me to sit. We're making some necessary cuts, he began, doing his best impression of a man with empathy. You've been here a long time, and we appreciate your service. But compliance functions have evolved. I raised an eyebrow. Evolved? Yeah, he said, waving his hand like he was banishing a ghost. We've streamlined. Risk is now baked into operations, so we don't really need a dedicated person hounding people over email all day. I didn't say a word. I just watched his mouth move like a fish gasping on a dock. Then came the line. His big mic drop moment. Your title was inflated anyway. Inflated. Like a novelty balloon at a sad birthday party. Like the ego of a guy who thinks cutting legally mandated roles will win him a seat at the grown-ups table. I glanced at HR. She was studying the pattern in the carpet like it held the secrets to the universe. Nobody dared meet my eyes. He slid a manila envelope across the desk like he was dealing blackjack. You'll find your severance details inside. 2 weeks. We're being generous considering, well, the current climate. I opened it, looked at the number. Laughed. Actually laughed. It slipped out like a cough coated in jet fuel. HR flinched. Greg's smile twitched. I assume this is contingent on signing the enclosed NDA? I asked, tapping the packet. Greg nodded. Standard. No disparagement. No lawsuits. No whistleblowing. You get it? Oh, I got it. What he didn't get was that the NDA was toilet paper compared to the legal firecracker he just lit. You don't fire your federally mandated compliance officer, especially not when her name's on every quarterly filing, every policy sign-off, every internal control document sent to the SEC for the past 10 years. But I didn't say that. Not yet. I stood, took the envelope, and smiled politely like I was being dismissed from jury duty. Greg gave me a patronizing chuckle. Look, Denise, it's not personal. We're just trimming the fat. I looked him square in the eye. Funny. I always thought cancer was what you trimmed out. And I left just like that. No tantrum, no speech. Just me, 10 years of institutional memory and a ticking compliance time bomb and a thumb drive the size of a chiclet. Out in the hallway, people avoided me like I was contagious. A few whispered. One brave intern mouthed, "I'm sorry." But I wasn't, not really. Because I knew something Greg didn't. When you fire the person who holds the legal spine of your operation, you better pray they don't have receipts. I had binders. The parking garage was quiet. That stale, oily kind of silence, broken only by the occasional echo of a slamming car door or someone's cursed Bluetooth autoconnect blaring top 40 out of a Corolla. I stood by my rusted-out Accord, the same one Greg once joked wasn't up to company optics, and dropped the envelope onto the passenger seat like it was biohazard waste. For a minute, I just sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing. Not crying, not shaking, just processing. Then I reached into the center console, past the gum wrappers and expired chapstick, and pulled out a flash drive. Matte black, no label, looked like nothing, contained everything. That drive held what I called the ARC, over 300 emails, some as old as Greg's first hair transplant, some from just last week. All time-stamped, all archived, all ignored. Warnings about misallocated retirement funds. Improper disclosures. Risk audits they never completed. Certifications they forged with digital signatures copied from outdated PDFs. And my favorite, the off-the-books client relationship fund that Greg once joked was just networking with bourbon. Every time they'd laugh me off, every time I was told to lighten up or stop crying wolf, I saved it. Not out of spite, not at first. But because I knew, one day they'd hang themselves with the very rope they mocked me for measuring. And today was that day. I opened my laptop right there in the car, coffee thermos still steaming beside me like some twisted farewell party. Booted up the VPN, logged into the private email I hadn't touched in years, and opened a new draft to the SEC whistleblower office. Not legal, not the help desk. The office. The one with subpoena power and a bloodhound's nose for cover-ups. Subject, potential violations, compliance officer termination, and record archive attached. One folder. Zipped, encrypted, labeled, for when shit hits the fanzip message body, short and sweet. To whom it may concern, I am the former senior compliance and risk oversight officer at company name redacted. Attached are documented instances of potential regulatory violations, filed and timestamped under my oversight. Please confirm receipt. Sincerely. Denise last name redacted registered compliance designate, 2013-2023 no dramatic flourish. No manifesto. Just the facts polished like bullets and aimed at the temple of every executive who ever thought I was a harmless rulebook with lipstick. I hit send. And just like that, the air shifted. Not for the world, not yet, but inside me. That deep crack down the middle of my soul, where 10 years of being overlooked, mocked, minimized, used to throb like an exposed nerve, it went quiet, cold, hardened because I wasn't scared anymore. They'd fired me to save face. Trim costs, flex power. But they fired me without checking the locks I kept on their skeleton closets. As I pulled out of the garage, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. Not at the building. At the storm I'd just uncorked. They wouldn't hear it yet, wouldn't feel it. Not today, but the pressure was building. The pipeline was laid. And the first regulator ping would hit like thunder. That night, I didn't eat, didn't pour a glass of wine, didn't even change out of my office slacks, which still smelled faintly like the elevator's burnt coffee breath. I just sat at my tiny kitchen table, laptop open, waiting to see if I'd flinch. It's one thing to hit send from your car with adrenaline still buzzing in your jaw. It's another to sit at home, in silence, with nothing but the refrigerator hum and a draft creeping under the window, wondering what you've just done. Because even when the law is on your side, even when you've read the whistleblower statutes cover to cover, there's still that voice. You know the one. The little coward in your brain that says, what if they find a way to ruin you anyway? What if Greg's golf buddy in legal pulls strings? What if some internal smear campaign gets traction? What if you become that woman? The one who couldn't take a joke, who burned the house down because she didn't get a goodbye cake? I scrolled through the SEC site again. Reread the protections. Rechecked the case examples. Reconfirmed that yes, I was covered under Rule 21F2, which gives legal protection to individuals providing original information about securities violations. I wasn't paranoid. I was informed. I opened a new email, this one to the Senior Enforcement Counsel listed in a case I'd bookmarked months ago. Because you don't do a decade in compliance without knowing who carries the big knives at the agency. This wasn't a complaint, it was a dossier. Attachments. For when shit hits the fan, zip, password sent via secure Proton Mail channel, annotated index of violations, color-coded by risk tier, summary PDF titled, Failure to maintain designated compliance oversight. Subject, immediate review requested termination of registered officer, prior to 10Q filings message. Per our prior correspondence and existing risk flags logged under company name redacted, I am submitting this archive as formal documentation of systemic compliance negligence and willful nondisclosure. I have included internal evidence of falsified compliance certifications, improper client classification, unreported risk events exceeding materiality thresholds, and the unlawful termination of the federally designated compliance officer 2 weeks before quarterly reporting. Please advise of next steps. I proofread it 3 times, breathed, hit send. Then, for the first time in weeks, I slept without waking up at 3 a.m. with my jaw clenched and my fists curled into receipts. Meanwhile, back at the firm, the silence surrounding my departure was almost celebratory. Greg strutted around like a weatherman predicting sunshine after a hurricane. A new org chart went out within 24 hours, compliance listed under general admin support, 3 boxes down from facilities. An email was circulated from the COO about efficient restructuring, and someone in marketing had the gall to reply all with a gif of someone popping champagne. That one stung a little. Not because I cared what they thought, those people thought GDPR was a perfume brand, but because I'd spent a decade being the quiet guardrail no one noticed until the cliff. Greg even hosted a fat-free Friday happy hour, in which the removed rolls, mine included, were toasted as tough but necessary cuts to keep the business lean. One of the interns told me that through tears and guilt in a DM. Lean. Sure, lean like a building with all the support beams quietly removed. They didn't see it yet, but the tremors had started. Somewhere in an office they couldn't access, a regulator was reading my summary file, and somewhere deep in a government database, my name was being flagged as the last person who tried to keep them clean. I wasn't afraid, I was watching. Calm, still, like the eye of a storm that hasn't introduced itself yet. The first tremor came on a Wednesday, 9:37 a.m., timestamp courtesy of a project manager who liked to overshare on Slack. Apparently, a man in a gray suit and zero patience walked through the lobby, flashed a badge, and headed straight for the executive floor. No chit-chat, no badge scan, just a federal level "I don't have time for your PowerPoint" gate. Of course, no one said SEC out loud. Not yet. That would have been admitting something. Instead, the office whisper mill dubbed him client liaison, which is code for we have no idea who the hell that was, but we're pretending this is fine. A letter had arrived, though. Not emailed, delivered, printed on heavy cream-colored stock, addressed to the firm's general counsel. Subject line, request for immediate cooperation, preliminary inquiry, regulatory oversight lapse. They called it routine. Greg said as much in the Friday staff huddle, his voice extra peppy, like he was narrating a Super Bowl commercial for retirement funds. These things happen, he chirped, all part of being a growing firm in a highly regulated space. Translation, don't panic, but I'm already sweating through my undershirt. What they didn't know was that one of my old coworkers, Carmen, sweet soul, always brought in banana bread, still had me on her private Gmail thread. She didn't say much, just forwarded a photo she'd snapped on her phone while walking past the legal conference room. The door was closed. Inside, 4 execs were sitting like someone had just announced an asteroid was coming. One of them had his head in his hands. Greg was standing, arms folded, jaw tight. On the whiteboard behind them, Q2 cert. Who signed? Scrawled in red. I hadn't signed anything, of course. They'd fired me before quarterlies were filed, which meant they either backdated a signature or left it blank and prayed no one noticed. But someone had noticed. I had made sure of that. More meetings followed, the kind that never hit the shared calendar. Finance was pulled in. Then HR, then IT. Word leaked that emails were being pulled from archives, server logs being reviewed. Suddenly, everyone remembered that compliance lady who always asked for things in writing. My ghost had become a presence. I wasn't in the room, but my name was, whispered in boardrooms, hissed in back hallways, tapped out in hushed texts. Denise warned us about this, didn't she? I thought Greg said she was just overhead. Wait, she was the official compliance signatory. No one said it directly, but the feeling rippled through the office like a cold front. Maybe the rulebook girl wasn't so useless after all. Meanwhile, I was at home, watering my pathetic window plants and answering polite follow-ups from SEC staff who were now requesting a phone call, informal, just to clarify a few timeline details. I scheduled it for Friday. Used my calm voice, explained everything, had notes ready, referred to emails by exact subject line and date. They were impressed. No, I didn't know who signed the Q2 certifications. Yes, I was terminated 2 weeks prior to filing. Yes, I'd raised concerns about this timeline internally. Would I be willing to provide a sworn statement? Gladly. I ended the call, poured myself a glass of water, and stared at the folder of printed emails on my kitchen table, each one a little landmine they thought would never go off. Back at the company, the tone had shifted. You could hear it even in Carmen's updates. Greg's jokes had stopped. The marketing team was told to pause all public statements. IT blocked external drives, and the interns were warned not to speak to anyone outside the firm regarding internal affairs. Paranoia had bloomed, and I didn't need to lift a finger. My job was already done. I'd become an echo, a paper trail with teeth, a presence too loud to ignore and too quiet to discredit. The SEC's second letter wasn't polite. It was clinical, direct. A quiet scalpel slicing through the firm's favorite delusions. Please submit copies of all internal compliance certifications filed under 206, 4-7 for the past 3 quarters, along with names and roles of registered compliance personnel active during certification. That landed like a body on the boardroom table. Because guess whose name was on every single one of those certifications? Mine. Signed, dated, cross-referenced. Federal timestamp. Registered Compliance Oversight Officer since 2013. The only person, the only one with SEC-recognized authority to sign off on those filings. And now, fired 2 weeks before quarterlies. No signatory, no cover. Nothing but a string of awkward Slack messages from Greg to legal asking, can we maybe say the CFO signed in her place? Followed by legal's response, that's not how any of this works. They tried to fix it, of course. Retroactively. Desperately. Someone from HR texted a former employee they'd axed last year, asking if she still had her compliance credentials. She said no, then screen capped the message and tweeted it with, imagine getting laid off and then asked to falsify federal filings. Nah, I'm good. Greg called an emergency leadership meeting. They pulled in an outside consultant, a guy with 3 first names, and a LinkedIn photo taken in a Tesla showroom. He charged $400 an hour to evaluate operational liability exposure. Translation, he was there to figure out how badly they'd just screwed themselves without using the word indictable. And all the while, they avoided saying my name, like I was some ancient curse carved into the server room walls. But I could feel it, in the delay of their press releases, in the abrupt change to all hands optional, in the death of the firm's weekly wins and celebrations email. The mood had curdled. An invisible black hole had opened where I used to sit. Carmen messaged me. They're trying to refile the Q2 certs with Greg's name on them. Legal looks like they've aged a decade in a week. I replied, they might want to Google false certification liability, because it wasn't just sloppy, it was criminal. Under Sarbanes-Oxley, executives signing false certifications can face fines, personal liability, even jail time. And the SEC, they don't do mercy, they do paperwork with teeth. Meanwhile, the firm's investors started asking questions. Where is the current compliance officer listed on your documentation? Why are your quarterlies flagged for review? Is this material risk exposure being disclosed in the 10Q? The execs tried to spin it. There's been a temporary reorg. The compliance role is now decentralized. We're modernizing oversight. But the SEC wasn't buying it, and neither were the shareholders. Inside the firm, everything started unraveling in micro motions. Access permissions were changed. Meetings became one-on-one panic huddles. IT started quietly auditing email threads, looking for scapegoats. Some poor analyst was tasked with creating a new risk visualization dashboard in Tableau. Like a damn color-coded chart would make the feds forget the missing signatures. From my side, I just watched. Pajamas on, tea steeping. A cat curled up beside me like an emotional support lawyer. And the best part, I didn't have to shout. I didn't have to post on LinkedIn or write a Medium think piece titled When Compliance Goes Unheard. I didn't need to stage a public breakdown or leak anything to the press. My silence was a vacuum. My absence was a crater. And every meeting they held without me only deepened the echo of the one person who knew how to keep the walls from falling in. I wasn't there anymore. But I'd never been louder. Greg always had this move. He'd lean forward in his chair, elbows on knees, voice low like he was sharing a secret with you and only you. He thought it made him sound sincere. It made him look like a bad actor trying to sell sincerity at a discount. Now he was sitting across from SEC counsel, doing that same little routine. Palms open, head tilted, voice trembling just enough. Well, yes, she was technically our compliance officer, but in hindsight, she didn't exactly make things clear. A lot of the concerns she raised were vague. Passive, nothing that indicated the urgency we needed. A pause. I mean, if she'd really thought something was serious, wouldn't she have escalated it more formally? Ah, there it was. The grenade he thought would land with a soft thud. Blame the woman who's not in the room. Across the table, the sex lead investigator, a woman named Clarkson with an expression carved out of basalt, didn't blink. She didn't scribble notes, didn't even lift her coffee cup. She just said, we'll return to that, and clicked to the next slide in her presentation. Slide 12, subject, Q2 sign-off. Missing documentation and risk event logs from Denise, last name redacted to Greg, CFO, General Counsel CC, legal internal audit date, March 27, 9:14 a.m. Attached full audit trail with notes. Compliance risk memo, redline policy drafts, certification checklist flagged as incomplete. Clarkson clicked again. Slide 13, subject, escalation, non-responsive on prior memo from Denise to Greg, date, April 2, 10:01 a.m. Per my March 27 communication, we are out of compliance with filing protocols and lacking proper certification documentation. If unresolved by Friday, I am required to notify our regulatory liaison. Slide 14. Subject, per our conversation, documentation still pending from Denise to General Counsel date, April 6, 6:48 a.m., reiterating that our Q2 certification lacks SEC-mandated documentation. Please advise on mitigation or escalation protocol. Clarkson closed the laptop. Then she looked Greg square in the eye and said, "That's 3 formal escalation notices in less than 2 weeks, including one with legal copy. Are you claiming you didn't receive these?" Greg opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed. "Well, I mean, I saw them, but it didn't seem that." Clarkson raised a hand. "We've confirmed the metadata. All were received, opened, and timestamped within your inbox. One was forwarded to another executive with the comment, quote, 'Denise is being hysterical again.' Do you recall that?" HR, who had been summoned for optics, visibly flinched. The CFO stared down at his notebook like it might sprout legs and walk him out of the room. Clarkson folded her hands. "So we'll strike the claim that she failed to escalate. The record is clear." And just like that, I didn't have to say a word. I wasn't there in that room, but my voice rang through every line of that email trail, crisp, documented, incontestable. They'd buried me in paperwork for 10 years. Now it was my shield, my sword, my goddamn resurrection. Later that day, I got a follow-up from the agency. "Misredacted, we have cleared your conduct of any liability. In fact, you may request your cooperation in further proceedings should you be willing." I replied with one word, willing. Carmen texted me an hour later. "Greg looked like he aged 10 years in 10 minutes. They read your emails out loud." I nearly applauded. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at my laptop, a quiet grin spreading across my face. For years, I'd been the voice they ignored. Now, I was the only voice that mattered. Thursday morning, 7:42 a.m. I was sipping lukewarm diner coffee in a chipped porcelain mug when Carmen's message lit up my phone. "Board just called an emergency meeting. No agenda. All VPs required. Shit's officially boiling over." By 8:30, she'd followed up with a photo. The conference room, glass-walled, always too cold, affectionately dubbed the fridge, was full. Greg, arms crossed tight. CFO pacing like a zoo animal. General counsel scribbling into a notepad as if sheer volume of ink might legally shield her. Everyone else looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, including prison. According to Carmen, the board opened the meeting with one sentence. "We'd like to walk through the timeline of compliance failures, starting with Miss Denise redacted." And then, the unraveling began. See, executives lie best when they lie together. When there's a party line, a shared delusion. A handshake under the table. But the second cracks show, when subpoenas start arriving and people realize we're in this together actually means you're the fall guy, they turn on each other with a speed that'd shame a pack of starving rats. Greg spoke first. She was always overly cautious, he offered, like that was a legal defense. She didn't have a strategic understanding of the business. She flagged everything. Translation, "I'm going to try to discredit the woman who saved our asses for a decade, because I know what's coming." But then the CFO, previously Greg's yes man, cut in. "That's not how I remember it. Denise brought concerns directly to finance about revenue misreporting related to the RIA division. You told her to stay in her lane. That's in writing." Greg went pale. "I never said that. You CC'd me." The general counsel cleared her throat. "The real issue is that we don't have a single filing from last quarter with a legally recognized compliance officer's certification. That's the operational failure." Greg, well, she was supposed to general counsel. She was terminated. By you, 2 weeks before filing. And no replacement was registered. Greg turned to the COO, hoping for life raft. "Didn't we submit the Q2 cert under dual authorization?" The COO blinked. "Told me legal had it covered." GC snapped, "Absolutely not. We said Denise was the only credentialed officer on record. We advised against filing without her." The room tilted. One board member, a silver-haired man who hadn't spoken in years unless the quarterly stock price dipped, leaned forward and said, "I've reviewed the correspondence. Denise appears to have been the only one following protocol." Another added, "She's also the only one who warned you." Repeatedly, formally, and you ignored her. Greg stammered something about process breakdowns and chain of communication, but it was like spitting on a house fire. The alliances that held the firm's facade together, Greg and legal, legal and finance, finance and ops, began imploding. Muted accusations flew. Every exec tried to carve out a safe zone, like survivors on a sinking ship elbowing each other off the last life raft. They started naming names, referencing Slack messages, rereading emails. One even quoted my March memo word for word, probably the first time any of them had bothered to actually read it. Meanwhile, I was still at the diner, halfway through a cinnamon roll the size of a steering wheel, scrolling through SEC updates and sipping my third refill. The waitress, bless her, didn't rush me. Probably figured I was mourning a divorce or recovering from a midlife crisis. Close enough. My phone pinged again. "Carmen, naturally. They brought up your March 27 email again, the one with the red line policy doc. They read it out loud." One of the board members said, "Seems like she was the only adult in the room." Greg hasn't blinked in like 5 minutes. I smiled, stirred my coffee with a chipped spoon. I didn't need to be in that boardroom. My voice was already there. My emails, my warnings, my ghost in the machine. And I could picture it, the panic, the sweaty brows, the flailing attempts at revisionist history collapsing under the weight of my quiet, relentless documentation. It wasn't personal, it was structural. They built a house on quicksand and fired the one woman holding the map to the bedrock. And now they were sinking, and I was watching. Calm, serene, spoon tapping glass as the empire cracked. The conference room wasn't their usual boardroom. No skyline view, no complimentary Pellegrino, no overpriced ergonomic chairs for backpatting executives. This was a government building. Fluorescent lights that buzzed like hornets. Carpet the color of regret. No windows, no exits except the one behind the SEC seal on the wall. Greg sat under that seal like a kid called into the principal's office for burning down the gym. No tie, sweat rings blooming through his shirt like guilty little sunbursts. Hair flattened and damp, like it had been styled with panic and a damp paper towel. Across the table sat Clarkson, the same SEC investigator who dismantled his lies 2 weeks earlier with a few polite clicks and a PowerPoint. Today she had a hard copy folder, thick, tabbed, labeled. She opened it. The room hushed. Mr. Riley, she began, voice flat as a legal disclaimer, as CEO of Company Redacted, who held final authority over compliance personnel and quarterly certifications during Q2 of this fiscal year, correct? Greg coughed. Yes, that's correct. And this is your signature on the termination notice for Miss Denise, last name redacted, your senior compliance and risk oversight officer? He nodded. Yes. And on that notice, the stated reason for termination was, quote, restructuring due to role redundancy, correct? Correct. She flipped a page. Mr. Riley, were you aware at the time of this termination that Miss Redacted was the only federally registered compliance officer on file with the SEC for your firm? Greg hesitated. I was under the impression that her title was more administrative in nature. Clarkson didn't blink. Administrative? I mean, it was very inflated. She mostly sent emails. She wasn't involved in executive strategy. She let that hang in the air, then leaned in slightly, hands folded. Oh, to clarify, you fired your only certified compliance officer 2 weeks before filing federally mandated quarterlies because her title sounded inflated to you? Greg opened his mouth, closed it. She turned to the projection screen. With a subtle click, she brought up the first slide. Email 1 of 312 subject. Risk escalation pending certification incomplete from Denise to Greg date March 27 time 9:14 a.m. Another click. Email 17 of 312 subject. Sec Rule 206 4-7 noncompliance alert from Denise to General Counsel CC Greg date April 2 time 6:33 a.m. Another click. Email 61 of 312 subject. Final notice Q2 filing will be invalid without officer sign-off from Denise to Exec Team date April 7 time, 7:01 p.m. Slide after slide, subject lines like daggers, each one a neon sign that screamed, I told you so in legalese. Greg sat still as stone, but the sweat on his temple glistened under the overhead lights. Clarkson closed the folder. The commission finds that Miss Redacted repeatedly, formally, and correctly escalated compliance violations through appropriate channels. All warnings were documented, all were ignored, and following her termination, her firm filed quarterlies without a legally recognized signatory, rendering them invalid. Greg's voice was a rasp. I didn't think she cut him off, that much is clear. The room fell into silence so complete you could hear the recycled air wheezing through the vents. Someone on the panel finally spoke. Is Miss Redacted present? I stood up. Calm, composed, navy blazer. No makeup, no performance, just me. The ghost they tried to erase now fully materialized, standing in the light of institutional reckoning. Clarkson looked at me. Would you like to make a statement? I shook my head once. No, the emails speak for themselves, and I sat back down. No speech, no gloating, no vengeance dance. Just silence backed by documentation, powered by precision, sharpened by a decade of being ignored. Greg stared forward, jaw slack. The board would be notified. Fines were incoming. Possibly personal liability. Possibly more. Careers would end. Trust would evaporate. The firm would be reduced to a cautionary tale in a PowerPoint at some future compliance conference. And me, I'd already walked away, already cut the ties, cleared my inbox, forwarded the final message. My revenge was finished not with fury, but with proof, with cold, irrefutable, federally timestamped truth. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.